Flames, fire. I'm going to start off with a trivia question. Any guesses? This might be a little bit out of the box. Any guesses when Toy Story came out? Close, very close. 1995. Toy Story came out in 1995. That feels like it should not be that long ago. And here's the thing about Toy Story: there's a tension. I'm gonna ruin it for you if you haven't seen it yet. I'm sorry. It came out in 1995, so I'm not really that sorry. Here's the thing: Woody and Buzz Lightyear, right? They have a tension throughout the entire movie. And this is the reality that Buzz saw things his way, and then there's another perspective that was added, though, because Woody saw things the right way. And this is relationship 101. This is what we do all the time. We see things our way, somebody else see things their way, and we know at our core that ours is the right way. Like, here's the reality. If they would just see it my way, everything would be okay. We could tell them that. Sometimes we try, and that works out really good, especially if you just say those words. Hey, if you just see it my way, this would work out great. Everybody be happy. Sometimes you even say words like this, and this doesn't ever work out right. What's wrong with these people? I mean, that's when we get into these relational, conflict and pressure and tension, you think if they would just see it my way, everything would work out. And at the end of the day, these people are broken. These people are way off. What is wrong with them? Right? If I could just kind of say the quiet part out loud of this series, and I know that this doesn't sound very spiritual, but we really just throughout the series, we want to get people to see things our way. We know that if we could just get people to see things our way, the conflict would go away, everything would be right? Because how many times are our holidays ruined? Thanksgiving's ruined because we just can't quite get over that conversation. They just won't quite see it our way. Christmas gets really uncomfortable. You're handing out presents and you don't make any eye contact with them, right? It's like, that's a weird thing. This series is going to be fantastic. We're going to go through all different kinds of techniques that you're going to be able to utilize in order for people to see things your way, from your perspective, because we know if they could just get there, everything would work out perfectly, right? This even works with students. If you have kids, to try to convince a student that they need to do their biology homework, they're complaining. They're like, why do I have to do this? It's not that important. I'm not going to use this ever again in my life. And you're like, actually, you might. And here's the thing. You need to get a good grade in biology because I need you to go to a good college, because I need you to get a good job, because down the road, eventually, I'm going to need you to have a job that you can take care of me. So this biology grade is, in fact, important to my well-being. So please do your homework. What about you have a sibling, you have a brother or sister that just goes off the rails and they say that one thing that one time in that one setting, and it's so uncomfortable and it's just awkward. Everybody in the room just quiets down real quick. No one's saying anything else. And then from then on, every single interaction, that's all you can think of. You are crazy. That's all you can think of. You're the crazy person in the room. You're the crazy person. You want to say it, but you don't. And it's so difficult because people need to be managed. So we're going to give you some tools in order to help you manage people. This is called the C4 approach to relationship management. No relation to plastic explosives here. So here's the thing. Perception-wise, you might think this is about bringing people together, but really it's just about getting them to change to your viewpoint, right? The right one. So the C4 approach includes these 4 C-letter words, because if I wasn't, I'm a mediocre pastor, so I have to have the alliteration. So convince, convict, coerce, control. The next month, we're going to be going over these 4 C words in order to make sure that we have the tools necessary to get people to see things our way. Because we know, like I said, if we can just get them to see it our way, everything would be okay. And if you're not convinced by that, just take a look at this video of some people that it worked out for.
The The C4 approach to relationship management has completely turned our marriage around.
Absolutely. So close to just failing, you know? All 4 C's are complete game changers. Convince, coerce, convict, and control. If there was a 5th C, it'd be cool.
6 months ago, I was gonna take a week and a half off for my wedding and honeymoon. The day before I headed out to the resort, Lisa told me that she needed a pitch deck done in a day and a half. And what did I say? You said, looks like you'll need to postpone that wedding. I'm single now.
My relationship with my son has always been very interesting. He loves acting, but I love football. He's my son, he lives in my house, so he should be playing my favorite sport. The C4 approach to relationships understands that and helps me call all the right plays.
I can't wait to try my costume.
Uniform.
And then go to my audition.
Tryouts. Hey, what do you do when you score?
You bow.
Spike it, son. You spike it.
Check out the C4 approach to relationships ASAP. You'll learn things like how to shame journal.
I started a shame journal myself, and it's just a detailed list of every time that Emily has hurt me or let me down. And now, when we have an argument, I just read her a few entries, and before you know it, she sees things my way.
I've been journaling since 8th grade. Yeah.
Like I said, it's a pretty good approach. Here's the secret, though. I'm going to tell you, as we go through this content, make sure you don't tell the other person that you have the conflict with this information, because they're convinced that you're the problem also. So they will try and turn it around right on you. They're going to use the same approach back at you and use the C4 approach, right? The convict, convince, convict, coerce, control. They're going to try to turn this around right back on you. So don't let them know what you're doing. Try and do this without them knowing all about this. This works great, right? It works when people try to do this to us. We respond really well. When someone tries to coerce me, I respond greatly, right? That's my strong suit. Okay, the gig is up. No. The last 10 minutes, you're like, is this serious? Are we real? No, it's not real. This is what our knee-jerk reaction is, though. When we come into conflict with people, our knee-jerk reaction, our initial response, without even thinking about it, is one of these routes that we take. And it doesn't help the relationship. It doesn't help the tension. It doesn't help anything. In fact, it makes it more difficult. And after trying, you try to manipulate, you try to control, you try to do whatever you can in order to get the relationship to land where you want it to, you end up saying things like this. Well, there's nothing I can do about it now. I tried. I don't even care anymore. And that never works. That never leads you into a place of health in the relationship when you give up on the relationship altogether. It's kind of, if you can imagine this, the more pressure that we place on trying to fix it, the closer we are to actually full on breaking it. And some of us have experienced, as that pressure builds in the relationship, eventually it does break down. Eventually there is a breaking point where it's no more. And then you just have to go to Thanksgiving awkwardly for the rest of your Thanksgivings, right? You just try not to sit at the same table as them. Don't think of repair that should be that difficult, but it actually is. Repair is incredibly difficult for the relationship. We think it should just be like, oh, quick fix here. But it's not. Relationships are far too messy, far too tricky, far too nuanced in order for it to be a quick fix. That's why we're in this series that is called Reassembly Required, a beginner's guide to repairing broken relationships. Throughout this series, we're going to discuss how to move toward reconciliation, not using the C4 approach. That's not the route that we're going to take. We're going to talk about some other aspects here that are going to pave the way towards reconciliation. If I could describe relationships, though, they're kind of like cars, because I know how to run a car really well. Like I can get in, I can turn the key on, turn the ignition on, and like push the brake and the gas pedal like a pro most of the time. I'm really, really adept at like using my blinker, windshield wipers, all of that. I am great at those things. But I'm going to get vulnerable with you. The moment the check engine light turns on, I am like at a loss. I have no idea what to do. It's like, oh no. I don't know what to do with a broken vehicle. I don't know what to do when it breaks down. I don't have that skill. I don't have that knowledge. I don't have that information. And unfortunately, relationships are a lot like that. We don't know how to repair them initially. Our initial response is usually the wrong way because usually we reach for one of those C4 approach things. We reach for that convict button, that convict tool. We're like, I think this is going to fix it, and it does more damage than anything else. We end up saying things like this. I'm sorry if I offended you. Now, from a distance, when we think about this and we can justify it in our brain, we're like, no, I'm moving in their direction. I said the word sorry in the sentence. I am apologizing. You should be proud of me. But when we hear this line from somebody else, or when we hear from like a public, personality, something kind of is off, right? We have a red flag that goes up. We're like, that doesn't ring true. That rings kind of hollow. Something is wrong with this statement. Here's why. Because when you translate it, it means you're too easily offended. What I said wouldn't have offended most people. So the reality is, it's kind of like this picture of, the arm on the shoulder, like pat on the head. It is so patronizing. Like, we feel good that we moved in their direction, but all we did is just make sure that they feel worse off than they were before, that they're still the one that's wrong. Something is wrong with them because they're still offended. Most other people wouldn't be offended by what I just did or said, right? Here's another one. This is super fun. I said I'm sorry. Why are you still upset? And if you didn't flinch a little bit when you read that, just out of pure like shock and reaction, then we got some work to do. Because that's when you hear that, when you feel that, especially if you're married, you're like, here comes impact. Like, it's coming at me. You should not say this. This is not one that you should say, because it only points into a certain direction. This is what it's translated to. I've done my part. You should be fine by now. Since you're not fine, clearly something is wrong with you, right? Something's wrong with you. It assumes that you are the better person in the conflict. And if I'm honest, I don't say that statement out loud, but I'm really good at saying it with different words. And like I said about vulnerability with cars, that's not embarrassing. This is the embarrassing part. I do this with my wife, unfortunately, and she feels like she's the one that made the mistake often. Like, I am really good at making sure that she feels like she's the one that did it wrong, that it's not my fault. I did my part. Like, I'm good. I can justify it. I can show you. I have proof. Here's the bullet list, bullet points. I've got it. I've got my part done. What's wrong with you, essentially? I'm not very good at it. I'm standing up here this morning, not talking about this aspect, this whole series, because I'm a professional at this. I wrestle with it too. I struggle with it too. And here's what I know. It is absolutely important and valuable. The reality is this whole idea might have just paid for the price of admission for you. Like, if you utilize this in your life, in your relationships, it might just save your marriage or redirect it in a healthy direction. That's the hope, though. Reassembling a broken relationship is a learned skill. This is why we're talking about it. It's not easy. It doesn't come naturally. You have to actually see it before you understand how to practice it. And I'm just going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say probably your parents probably didn't exemplify the right way to reassemble a broken relationship. They probably reached for the C4 tools just like you do, because that's what's natural. That's what's normal. The approach that we're going to talk about, though, is different. It's a little bit different, because we want to make sure that we have some holidays coming up. And I know that this is perfect timing, because I want you to be able to be in those holiday moments and not just be awkward, uncomfortable, angry, just like a angry little person over in the corner the whole time. I want you to enjoy the holiday. I want you to enjoy family and friends that you have relationship with. This is incredibly, incredibly important. But even now, we catch ourselves saying things ahead of time like this. When are they coming? How long are they staying? Because we know there's that tension. It's like, okay, how long do I have to hold my breath while they're here in town? That's what we really want to know. How long do I have to behave and just bite my tongue the whole time? That's what I really want to know. How good are you at the no eye contact game? You pretty good? Pretty adept at this? You good at it at graduations, where you go to the graduation and you have the party afterwards and you just know how to avoid, just like, I'm just not going to be over there. You plan your timing to go get the food at the same time that they're in a different room, and then you work it around so when they're getting their food, you're at a different spot and you're just trying to avoid them altogether so you don't have to make eye contact. Here's a pointer for weddings if you're playing the no eye contact game. Wait till they sit down first and then make sure that your chair is turned to the, facing the other direction. And then you don't have to the uncomfortable where you look up from the food in front of you and you're like, oh, the eye contact. Oh, phew. I did not want to see them. I did not want to see their pupils all day because it's so uncomfortable. It's so frustrating. It's so painful sometimes. It is difficult. Have you ever eaten at the kids' table because you didn't want to sit at the adults' table with that other person? Have you done that before? There's all kinds of strategies involved, and none of those lead to health. None of those lead to where we want to go in our relationships. I hope that you haven't experienced this relationally, but I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to guess that some of you probably have, because we have, ultimately, if we don't repair the relationship, we end up having regret. This is so difficult. It's so frustrating. And we spend years of our life with this relational turmoil, not ever actually addressing it, not actually walking through to some type of health, some type of movement in a good, positive direction. We just sit in that tension of frustration, of angst, anxiety, anger. We avoid, we wait, we do all these other things, and what ends up happening is if something happens to that person, and maybe they get into an accident or their health declines or something, all of a sudden you realize how petty you actually were, and you wasted years of your life. Percentage of your life was wasted because you ignored them, because you decided that being right was more important than the relationship itself. You did these things. You waited. You tried to play the waiting game and just wait them out, making sure that they made the first move because they're at fault, not you. You rehearsed. We're really good at this. I think every single person is born a really good rehearser when it comes to our relational tension. We get in the car, we're like, if they would just open their mouth and just try to broach the subject, I'm ready. I'm fully loaded, ready to go. I am armed for bear. I know exactly what I'd say in what order. I will let them have it. You rehearse it over and over, sometimes with nobody else in the car with you. The drivers around you get an earful, though. Or sometimes you spend time just avoiding them. Right? We do this. This is our go-to. We do this. And all of this leads to regret, because there will be a moment when you realize how much time and how much life was wasted because you wouldn't move in their direction. You end up waiting until it's too late. And we think that we're doing this because we're the better person. I'm going to say that because you think that you're the better person, all of us do, we always think that we're the right person in this situation. Because you think that, then I'm going to suggest a different way. I'm going to suggest that we do something different. Because we all know what happens when being right is more important than being in relationship. If this is the priority, being right, if that is your highest value, you will find yourself without relationship. And you will find yourself approaching regret in those moments. Now, men, I know, let me speak to you just for a second. And this is a stereotype, so forgive me about stereotypes, but this is going to require some scary words that deal with emotions. And it's more than just angry or frustrated. Although we're really good at those two. We know what those are. We're going to have to deal with some other words. Like vulnerability, and that's not a fun one. Or like terrifying. We don't ever want to feel like we're terrified of something. And yet vulnerability sometimes requires that of us, right? Because it requires you to recognize you might have to say something or do something that places you in a perspective or in a viewpoint that you don't feel good about yourself in. That maybe how you'll look to other people will look weak because you are humbling yourself and moving first. And you're like, that's not a strong person. I'm going to tell you that's actually what a strong person looks like. But my hope for all of us as it pertains to adult relationships is ultimately that the goal, and I know this sounds kind of funny, but the goal isn't reconciliation. You thought probably I was going to say is reconciliation. It's not reconciliation. And the reason why is reconciliation cannot be controlled. You don't have control over the whole entire situation. You only have control over yourself. You can't control them, so you cannot control full reconciliation. It's like, if you played with airplane models when you've grown up, or maybe as an adult too, sure, I'm not going to judge. But if you break a model airplane and you have all these pieces on the ground, you can scoop up all those pieces and hold them in your hand. You can place them on the table, and you can manipulate each individual one. You can put glue on each individual one and put them all back together yourself. Why? Because yours are the only fingers on them. You can control every single piece. Not so in a relationship. You don't get to control every single piece in a relationship. You cannot. So our hope absolutely is reconciliation, but that's not our goal. Here's a pro tip. Never set a goal for another adult. Now, I know that you might be thinking of specific situations. You're like, but wait, what about the work employee? We're not talking about that. We're just talking about the normal, average adult relationship. Don't set a goal for another adult. And you might be thinking well, that's short-sighted. That doesn't let them succeed in life. I'm going to set a goal for them because obviously they don't have the goal set for them, so they need the goal. The reality is that when you set goals for other adults in your life, you're actually setting agendas for them. And agendas undermine relationships every time. And especially if the relationship is at odds with each other, if there's tension in the relationship, or if it's broken, an agenda is going to ensure that the relationship remains broken. So we have you ever tried that? Have you ever tried to set an agenda for someone? It works out great, doesn't it? Always. Every single time. It just works out fantastic. Here's why it doesn't work to set agendas. Do you enjoy when people evaluate and judge you? That's not like my happy time when I realize that someone's just been sitting there just trying to figure out how to fix me. That's not, I don't enjoy that. We don't enjoy that. So the goal isn't to set a reconciliation. The goal is actually no regrets. That's what the goal throughout this entire process is. Not to reconcile, but to have no regrets. Reconciliation is the hope in the relationship, but the goal itself that we can set for ourselves is no regrets. Which is fun, because anytime that I read no regrets, I like to think of all the tattoos that have regrets misspelled. And they instantly have regrets. It's a fun Google search. Anyway, so this means that you no longer get to ice people out. This means that you have to do whatever's in your power to remove the obstacles out of the way, even if they're their obstacles. We have to move from our position towards them to try to clear the way, to clear the path, to pave the way for hopefully reconciliation, but ultimately so that at the end of the day and at the end of the season, at the end of our life, when we're thinking back on these difficult moments, we can sit there and feel no regrets because we did everything within our power, everything within our ability to make sure that that door was open as wide as possible. If you're wondering why we're taking a whole entire month to discuss relationship, reconciliation, restoration, it's because I've been watching your Facebook posts. That's nervous laughter. No. Here's the reality. And this is one of those fun topics that even if you're just starting off your journey of faith and you're asking questions, or you somehow got your arm twisted to show up, they're like, hey, we'll buy you lunch if you show up to church with me. Whatever reason you're here this morning, we love that you're here. The information that you're going to hear this morning and throughout the series, You can kind of pick and choose. If you're early on, if you have not crossed that line of faith, you can pick and choose. I'm going to apply that. I'm going to try to use that, and I promise you, it will move you towards health, relational health. Here's the big idea, the big reason, though, why we're talking about this for a month. If you are a Jesus follower, this is not optional. This is not like a suggestion. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. This is the steps that we take to follow Jesus. Restoration of relationship. And we see this. The story of redemption from God is that he's reconciling this rebel race. And he's moving towards us and drawing us back in to himself. He wasn't content simply to just forgive us, to just forgive you, because ultimately forgiveness it's only half the equation. I mean, we can choose to forgive someone and never move towards relationship restoration. I can have a relationship at odds and I can forgive you, but I don't have to move towards reconciliation myself. I just say the right words, check it off the list, and I can be on my way. But the relationship itself hasn't come back together, hasn't grown back together, hasn't been mended. And mending is what Jesus showed us, that he wants more than just a forgiveness piece. Remember, the hope is reconciliation, but the goal is no regrets, that we're going to do whatever we can, not to just forgive someone, but to move in their direction and have, hopefully, the relationship come back together and do whatever we can in order to open the door for that to happen. Forgiveness is easier. Let's be honest. Forgiveness is easy because I hold all the cards when it comes to forgiveness. You can offend me. You can do something to me. I decide whether I want to forgive you or not. It's totally in my control. I hold all of those cards. Reconciliation, though, it's out of my control. And I know some of you, you're already like in your mind, you're crafting the email that you're going to send me and be like, hey, we need to talk because my specific situation is not healthy. And I would agree with you probably. Some moments in life, some relationships, it is unwise and unhealthy to actually put energy and effort into reconciliation. But that is the exception. That is not the norm. That is the exception and not the norm. According to Jesus, forgiveness and reconciliation, they're related. They're connected. They work together in tandem. Unfortunately, because of the inconvenience, the awkwardness, how uncomfortable it actually is, Christianity as a whole, we've just prioritized forgiveness a little bit more. It's like we can focus on forgiveness. Like we can get there. The other part, that's too messy. The other part, that is just way out of our control. It's way too difficult. So we focus on forgiveness, which is great. Forgiveness is wonderful. But like I said, it is only half of the equation. With forgiveness, we have this mentality. Well, God forgives me, so then I need to forgive you so I can be okay with God. I'm good at that point. Because the value that you have, the mentality that you have in that moment, is the vertical relationship. As long as I need to do whatever I can in order to be good with God. As long as me and God are good, I'm happy. But that is not the example that Jesus set. Jesus set an example where the horizontal relationships of those people around us are important. They're valuable. In fact, you could say that one of the best ways for you to express your love for your Heavenly Father is how well you love those around you. So if you're at odds with someone around you, I'm going to say there's some tension in that vertical relationship as well. Because just as much as you are a son or a daughter of God, just as much as Jesus died for you, he died for that person also. Let me burst your bubble. God doesn't love you more than them. And if our full focus is just on the vertical, we slip into that mentality really easily, really quickly. If we read through the Gospels show us that God isn't content to simply forgive. That's not the full end, right? God's forgiveness was a means to an end. It was for something else. It was for a greater purpose. And I don't want you to miss this because this might be the biggest thing that you hear from me all morning long. That God gave you forgiveness not to just forgive you, but to remove the obstacle in the relationship between you and him. God forgave you to open up that pathway of relationship. He removed the obstacle which was and is our sin. And that moves us towards reconciliation. Not just being forgiven, but reconciled to our Heavenly Father. At the end of Jesus' ministry, so this is 2,000 years ago, Jesus has been in ministry for about 3 years. And he's sitting in this upper room with his disciples. And I know we talk about this often. And there's a really important reason why we talk about this single moment often and these single words often. Because Jesus works and works to kind of condense and concentrate all of the law and the prophets, everything that they'd been taught, down to a single phrase, down to a single point, down to a single command that he gives us. This is in John chapter 13, verse 34. He says, "A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another." He doesn't say, just love God harder, just love God more, and I'll take care of the other relationships. Jesus' single command is loving other people the way that Jesus loved us. And within hours of this, Jesus is arrested, he's beaten, eventually he's crucified. Jesus is like, hey, take a picture of this. You want to know what God's like? You want to know what you need to do? Watch me. Watch me. Watch what I do in the next hours and day of my life. Watch what I do. I will show you what it means to be my disciple. I will show you what it means to follow me. It requires something that is painful, something that is difficult, something that is challenging. Jesus didn't stop at the forgiveness line. That wasn't the finish line. Jesus continued on into the reconciliation waters, which are muddied. They're difficult. They're murky. But he did it for you and for me. And that's the pattern. That is the pathway that he's asked us to follow him on. Reconciliation. It's a hope, but the goal is no regrets. That's the direction that we move. We want to do whatever we can in order to move in that direction. The Apostle Paul, who traveled around the Mediterranean Rim, planted a bunch of churches, and then wrote them letters in order to help encourage them and kind of course correct them and make sure that they're doing what they needed to be doing. So he wrote this letter, and it's called Philippians chapter 2, verse 5. He says it this way: in your relationships with one another. He doesn't say in your work relationships or in your marriage relationship or in your, parenting relationship. It says in your relationships. All of them, all inclusive. This is an all skate. Everybody that you have a relationship with is included in this statement. In your relationships with one another, continue on. Have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Have the same mindset. Now, this begs to ask the question, well, what exactly is Jesus' mindset? If you think about it, you think back to his actions, his behaviors, what he taught. There's this, one of the probably primary parables that he taught is the parable of the lost sheep. And this is supposed to show us what God is like. And in this moment, this sheep, he's got 100 sheep, 99 of them do what they're supposed to do. They stay in the pasture, they stay under his control. And the one sheep wanders off. And then what does Jesus do? What does the shepherd do? He goes after the lost sheep. We often think, man, that rebellious sheep, that rogue sheep, it knows where everybody else is. It can probably still hear the 99 sheep, baying. It can hear us talking to another. It knows exactly where we are. We haven't moved. When it's ready, that rogue rebellious sheep can come our direction. It's not the example that Jesus gave. That's not what Jesus said that God is like. He goes after, like a good shepherd, he goes after the lost sheep. Not to tell the lost sheep, you ruined it, you missed it, you messed up, you took the wrong turn, you were too stubborn. No, he goes after the lost sheep to bring it back. Goes after the lost sheep to protect it. Goes after the lost sheep to put it back in community where it belongs. Under his care, under his love. It's interesting. Religious leaders, they Jesus, everywhere he went, he had a bunch of people that would show up just to hear what he'd say. It was exciting. He was the new hot rabbi in town. Like, so everyone wanted to hear his teaching. They heard about the signs and the wonders. Like, what's this actually about? What's this like? But there's another group of people that also went around because their authority was being threatened because of what Jesus was teaching, as the religious leaders. So they love to kind of question and try to put Jesus in a corner and try to like pressure him to say the wrong thing, to do the wrong thing. And in one of those moments, they ask him one of their favorite questions. Jesus, you keep on moving in the direction of sinners. You're not supposed to do that. They're unclean. They're not good. They're unhealthy. Why are you moving in the direction of sinners? And in Luke chapter 5, verse 31, he responds, actually. He says, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners to repentance. The sinners to repentance. Jesus could have forgiven the sinners at arm's distance. But he goes in their direction. He eats meals with them to embrace them. Not to keep them at arm's distance, but to invite them in and embrace them. The irony here is you might be thinking like the Pharisees did and the religious leaders did, like, oh, it's us versus them. Like Jesus chose the sinners, Jesus chose the broken over us. No, the reality is everyone's broken. Every single one of them. If they would have been able to see that they themselves were still in that same category as the sinners, as the lost. It's interesting because the people that were the most unhealthy, thought that they were healthy. How true is that still today in our lives? We find out that the areas of our life that we think that we're the most healthy can often be the area that we're least healthy in. It's not us versus them. It's all of us. All of us have fallen short. All of us make mistakes. All of us sin. We behave in such a way that puts pressure and tension and starts to break down the relationship that we have with our Heavenly Father. All of us do that. Myself included. So, this isn't us versus them. This is about reconciliation, moving in their direction. Reassembling the relationship necessitates moving in the direction of the unreconciled. And following Jesus requires it. This isn't just a loose suggestion. This is the image. This is the picture. This is the route that if you're going to follow Jesus, that you must take. Remember, the goal is no regrets. Because I can't force reconciliation, but I can make it as inviting and as easy as possible. Next week, we're actually going to talk about one of the ways, this decision that we can all make in order to pave the way to reconciliation and make that happen. As difficult and uncomfortable as that relationship might be right now, we can do something. We can make a decision that paves that pathway. We're going to talk about that next week. But right now, for the time in between now and then, I have some questions for you. First and foremost, I want you to wrestle with this question. What's stopping me from trying? Because all of us have difficult relationships. All of us, a lot of us probably had, throughout this entire morning, you've had the picture of the person forefront in your mind the whole time we're talking about this. And some of you are sitting beside them. Super fun. But we have this tension in our life. Like, what is stopping you from trying? And once you figure out that you have actually answered that question, I want you to ask it again and add really at the end. What's stopping me from trying really? Because I'm going to tell you a bit of honesty. It's not just about them. Typically, when we answer that first question, what's stopping me from trying? You're like, well, they A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z. We got all of them. We got all the alphabet included. But what about you? What about your part? What's the actual reason why you're not trying? I have some other questions if that's too uncomfortable for you. Still want you to wrestle with it. But I have some other questions to keep the conversation going in your small groups or with your family or whoever you want to, because I think that this is an important conversation that you need to have not just in this building but outside as well to implement into your life and in your relationships. So, which of these 4 relational tools do you reach for first when conflict arises? Are you a convincer? That's the route that you take? Or you're all about the coercing, convicting, controlling? Which is the tool that you grab right away to try to bring on that relationship to fix it? Doesn't work that way. But which one are you more likely to grab? Next question. Do you have friends or family members who are estranged from members of their families? From where you sit, what's keeping the feud alive? This is really important information because you can sit at a different angle and see it differently. You can see it more accurately. So from your vantage point, what is it? What is it that's keeping family members, that's keeping people that should love each other away from each other? What's keeping the feud alive? And then let's just kind of twist it in a little bit further. Next question, if you are estranged from a friend or family member, what's stopping you from taking steps to repair it? What is it? What's stopping you? It's important to identify what it is that's holding us back. Because once you identify what's holding you back, then you can actually move forward. I get this. This is emotional. This is challenging. This is difficult. And it's really, really important. It's important for relational health. Even more than that, it's important for us, if we're going to follow Jesus, that we submit every aspect of our life to him, whether it be, finances, whether it be work, whether it be relationships, everything. When we follow Jesus, everything submits to him. And this is what it looks like to follow Jesus. Not just loving Jesus, but loving like Jesus also. And that's hard. It's difficult. It can be painful. But I'm going to promise you, if you work at it, if you put the effort in, if you decide to take a step in that direction, it will be worth it in the end. So let's step in that direction together. Come on back next week for part 2 of whatever series this is in. Reassembly required. There we go. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, God, we love you. And that part can be difficult to say out loud at first, but the more times that we say it, it becomes easier and easier. And then we recognize that the difficult part is treating other people the way that you have first loved us. The movement that you made toward us. I pray that we would take on that challenge. That we would take on and add our boldness and the courage that you placed in us, specifically for the opportunities that are before us right now. And right now they might seem like tension. Right now they might seem like frustration and anger and anxiety and all the other things. Right now it might look like sitting in separate rooms at Thanksgiving. But you gave us the potential. You gave us everything that we need to open that door, to actually bring health back into an unhealthy relationship, to actually move in their direction. I pray that you would give us the boldness and the courage to humble ourselves, even when we can justify our behavior. God, I thank you that you exemplified this to us, because you've never done anything wrong, and you move towards us, and we squarely put the obstacles in place. And then you remove the obstacles. And I pray that we would do whatever we can to do the same thing. I pray that we would place no regrets as the goal in our relationships, that we would love others well. In your name I pray. Amen.